Lore! Lore! There's the lore over there! And with it comes a hell of a lot of questions. Hopefully some that I can answer today. Sup, travelers? It's Will of the Will Ryan Originals channel, and today we are going to be answering Iris lore. So we're coming up on the 5th anniversary of Goliath's Throne, the Big 5. And to celebrate, we've got an Iris Direct happening October 30th, which it's a live premiere, so it's going to be fun, with a lot of cool new things we've been working on in the background. Don't worry, the A-game stuff is happening as well. That's still heavy. I mean, Black SSD just came out, so there's over there. And Solitude is heavy in the works for the game. We have added some new things, so it's very exciting. Same with the comic. I mean, what am I not doing? I'm constantly in work mode. It's crazy. But of course, comes with it a lot of Iris stuff. Now, for a lot of you, you obviously know what Iris is. You're here. You've come from DA Games. You come from everywhere. Some of you even started out with Will Ryan Originals, which, hello, that's kind of rare. And so for many of you, you know that the big Iris Day is usually on October 30th. It's where a lot of the big releases happen. It's somewhere around Halloween time. So you also know where Halloween is too. Although I imagine you probably knew about that anyway. Fuck it. So to run up to the day, I took to Instagram and opened the floodgates to have as many questions as possible about Iris. Any that need answering or any that, need some, just, you get it. My mind's not with it. I stutter like crazy. This is why I don't do solo videos anymore. I'm just not cut out for this kind of shit. Now, I'm not going to be able to answer every single one, as some of them pertain to lore that has not been revealed yet, nor will be for a period of time. But I will try to get through these as much as possible, and we'll see how it goes. So first up, this was by Luna Creator, and says, what inspired you to create Iris? That one's kind of long-winded. It hasn't really got a true beginning point, although the only beginning point I could really think about is the original name for Iris. And no, it's not Onyx Colony. It was, in fact, Iris, but it wasn't used in the story context that everybody knows. So when I was a wee baby, actually, I was just a teenager. I had an idea for a technology company that would sell incredibly high-spec products at affordable prices, because I clearly wasn't projecting. I clearly was. And it was named Iris. Now, business connoisseurs would probably turn around and be like, that's not affordable in this day and age. Everything must be as expensive as Apple. Thank you, Apple, for setting the standard. So I just botched the idea. Along the side, I also had a band called Onyx Colony. This was before DA Games. That slowly fizzled out, and I started getting into brand new projects, and I figured, well, it's just going to be me, and I want to do my own original thing. So I borrowed the tech company name, Iris, and just made that into the name as I was making Heart of an Artist. And it would follow a similar thing to Onyx Colony, in which there would be sort of a premise for it, but it wouldn't be too broad. Everything would be contained in that one album, and it's just kind of just edgy. I don't know. Goliath's Throne came around, and then I created the skeleton that you all know, which is Goliath. That was also supposed to be a very contained kind of story. Then Dawn of the Demetrix happened during the pandemic, and now Goliath has an enemy. And thus, Tolkien in space happened. Mind explosions and all that. So I don't know if I really have massive inspiration. I think it was just a slew of different events happening, and I always wanted to do a mixture of absolutely everything. I've got a bucket list. I want to do everything. In the creative field specifically, I want to do things. I've already done music. That's on my bucket list. It's done. But I want to start doing stories, comics, games, you name it. So that's why all this stuff's happening. I think just watching several different mediums and all of these different catalog things just got me thinking maybe I can do something. So I did, and here we are. It's about as much as I can get into on that one. Appreciate the question. So this was from Zero Model Kuwata. How did you come up with Abram's design? Well, like most designs, generally anything that I do, it just starts with a scribble. The Iris logo was literally just from a random accidental scribble, and then I ended up joining the dots, and there we go. With Abram, I remember he used to, because now you know him, he has the pink hair that goes down with the silver hair, and the Dova symbol kind of etched in. Originally, it wasn't even that. It was top, short, spiked hair, kind of longy, short. It was just gray hair at the top that kind of curved at the front somewhat. And I didn't necessarily like that idea. It reminded me too much of a Pokemon villain. So I just thought, well, let's make him do all this and stuff. I started getting a deep affinity for reddish pink. So I'm oh yeah, let's try that. Then of course, I have my concepts, but then I would hand that over to artists who are far more capable of bringing these things to life, and thus Aspen was the one who brought Abram to life, really. Started from a scribble, ended up with a great concept, and here we are, now we have Abram. This is from The Eye of the Beholder 2008. Did you expect Iris to expand into the big story that it is today. Yes and no. No, because I honestly thought that maybe every story would be semi-contained, but yes, in the sense that I always envisioned that Iris would be something larger than life. It's a part of me. I wanted to post something out there that just had these really cool indulgences that happen, trial and tribulation, truth over lie, all of that. I just wanted something there, and that was my outlet. I imagined it may get big, but then again, I also didn't expect it to be this big, if you get what I mean. This one is by Sparks, or Sora. What was the inspiration behind Abram and Dovacom? Oh, this was the pandemic. I think Dovacom came after Abram, and this was during the Valentine Renegade. Abram, I just needed some kind of villain for Goliath to go after. You know, something as a trial and tribulation. Needed a motive for Abram. A lot of it was Abram just is the embodiment of selfishness and wanting everything to himself and changing things to meet his narrative, whatever. And Dovacom came slowly afterwards just because I knew Abram would be in some form of facility. And Dovacom came because I started seeing things like HAL 3000 and Jarvis, you know, like having these AI sort of assistants help out. And I have Dovacom in mind. I think slowly over time, he suddenly became a bit more of a friend of Abram through that. He's the only friend he had, as opposed to just being there as a servant, you know? So again, just random peripherals just happening all at once. This one's from Straw Hat Girl saying, I really want to know what happens if a Philippices doesn't want to inhabit a mech. A mech is in, I'm guessing you mean Trojan Magnus. I cannot answer that. That stuff is kind of lock and key. There's actually some cool stuff I did with Trojan Magnus recently, but nobody's really going to see it. It's all... Here's my problem. I get this simple idea, but in order for it to work in such a big universe, I have to correspond with everything else. What's happening with this? What's happening with that? What's happening around this universe that affects this? Why is it? So I've had some brief bullet point ideas of what I wanted, but I can't enact on those. So it's not that I can't necessarily tell you, it's that I really, really, really can't. I have no idea. It's all lock and key. Ryan Joker Thompson says, how did you come up with the names and places of things and people in Iris? I have mouth and it flaps and then certain words come out and I kind of like those words and I just trust my gut. I wish it was a lot more extravagant than that. I'm not a very extravagant individual. Iris, I think, came from, if I'm looking back at the technological days, I think Iris came from just like, my favorite part of the human body is the eye. I think it's like the window to the soul. I think it tells everything about a character. It's not literal. I'm not just gonna stare in your eyes and go, you're a bastard. As much as that would be a really, really cool thing. That's not in any lore that I've had either. I know that it was like in things that you see, and I knew that with computers, you're going to see things, and it's like a window to the open. I think that's where it came from. Dovacom, I like Dova specifically, I think came from just the idea of like the cliffs of Dova, far beyond the scope of what our natural cities would be like. It's over yonder, it's over the Dova. So I had that in mind, and Dova was part of it. I think also Dova came from like, it was going to be the original operating system idea that I wanted for the technology company I was doing. It just comes from strange places. This one is from Xander Elliott 66. Says, when Abram demanded for his Dova visor, was it Goliath that took it, and how? Okay, so here's a misconception. I think a lot of people took what Abram said literally. It was like, did someone steal my Dova visor? And it's like, basically, nobody stole it. When the wormhole happened and it was closing up, there was stuff that was flying through the depths. So they were in a laboratory facility, so a lot of things like prototypes and all that stuff will have fallen through that wormhole as it happens. Goliath just so happens to pick it up. He didn't steal anything. It just fell through the wormhole, and there's this cool visor. And that, oddly enough, that was like one of the first prototypes of Abram Valentine's visors. As you see him a lot, he's wearing the pink one. That's the new flashy one that he had. Whereas the green one was just merely a prototype. Good question, though. Oh shit! I just lost my place. Do you know yours? This one's from Angel Animates Online, saying, in the teaser for the physical release of the OG Heart of an Artist, Dovacom and Abram disconnect and split at some point. What's that all about? What's the story? So, there's a war. This is during that was just shortly after the war in the GT arc. Dovacom and Abram, or essentially Dova Warrior as a whole, kind of connected together slowly before the war began. And so when the war ends, they've disconnected. I can't say much more than that. But what happens from that is essentially
There's a war.
Dova, Moira, or Dovacom borrowed information from Abram while they were connected, the same way that Abram borrowed off of Dovacom. So Abram gets ticks every now and then. He gets glitches and ticks from this stuff, and Dova Moira develops a bit of a human presence, being able to tap into all of that. This is Savannah the Fangirl. What languages did you use as inspiration for Nidori and Vegalian? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I think it's just a hodgepodge of several different ones. I think, Chinese and Japanese and German and Spanish and French, like that, a lot of them tend to have words that come before certain ones, and I think all I just thought in my head was like, well, what if I not only did that, but then combine the two together as, like there's a lot of ways that I did it, but I don't think I had like a general inspiration. Like I didn't go to watch a movie and go, I'm going to do that or anything. I don't normally do that either. Though subconsciously I might have, just based off of the fact that I've watched a lot and consumed a lot of things. I just can't pinpoint where. But if I had to go for anything, I guess it would be like a mixture of the many different types of languages that tend to put certain words before others where the English language probably wouldn't. Sem013 asks, what's a part of the Irish lore you feel is the most important to you? E.g. characters, certain events, etc. I think every one of them has a significant part to play, but I think the events and what happens in the story is like a lot more important than the characters themselves, what they're doing there, who they are, why they are. It's mostly about the events that happen. When I start writing stories, I'd like things happening and I'll just plop a character in and that will suddenly become their arc. There's a lot more to it, that's layman's terms in it, but it's kind of where it is. And I think one of the most important pivotal points, well, it hasn't happened yet, but the whole thing about Goliath is, he's on this mission to open the truth of the world that's led around a history of lies upon lies. Because like our own world, we tend to put lies underneath the rug and it ends up exploding into even worse history that gets made. And if we follow by the 100-year cycle, history tends to repeat itself around there. And I think most of the stories that I have tend to be a metaphor of representation of history repeats itself in the worst kind of way. But after that, I normally kind of talk myself down and I'm like, right, well, I just want to focus on a really cool war or a battle or whatever. But like everything comes from, I'd like this to happen, but I can't just have it happen. That's down to you guys, by the way. You all started asking all these crazy, I opened up the door for it. Long ago. This could have been so simple, but then everybody was asking so many things. And I think it was a place where I felt so scared of disappointing that I decided, all right, fine, I'll make them big. But now I'm really enjoying it. So yeah. I also think it's important, the character-wise, I think it's important to know who's doing certain things, keep a track record. But I also firmly believe that characters are allowed to be different from what their original thing is. Everybody talks about character growth, but there's not much talk about character regression. It's very underrated, and I'm tired of pretending it's completely bad. But as far as when I tell stories, yes, summary, it's more the events that happen. The characters come in later. RiriLove02 says, is Iris telling a story? And if so, what is the story about? Will we see or hear more about it? How can I describe this? Iris is the pursuit of truth in a galaxy riddled with lies. It's about where I can go. It's a bloodshed, it's warfare, it's tyranny, it's every bit of cool, awesome galactic boss stuff. And yes, there will be a hell of a lot more about it as the time goes on. Because we've released Story of Vega. In fact, we've had a load of arcs, and there's a bit of information around the internet. But if you're new to this, I highly recommend you forget everything else and just stick with Story of Vegala. Otherwise, you're going to be listening to a lot of different fan theories that might be very wrong. But yes, we will be focusing. I'm currently writing the Behemoth arc book, which is focused on Goliath's journey throughout the dawn of the Demetrix arc. That stuff will be explained later. Blazia Silva Duel says, how did Goliath get his scythe? And does it have any overarching abilities aside from being a badass weapon? I'm debating on whether to answer this one. As far as him getting the scythe, he gets that from his father, Father Tyrant. Upon their tyranny, when the wormhole opens and the Demetrix is kind of hypnotized on its colony against their king queen. And Goliath hears the shrieks, goes in, sees them on the floor, and Tyrant and Fate are like, take my cloak, take my scythe, take this omen glass, take this, and stop this, because they... You get it. But that's how Goliath gets his scythe. As far as what the scythe does, it originated from being a staff, Father Tyrant's staff. And the scythe end was after the big fight in Jaws of Dawn with Motha Hive. That was a remnant of Motha Hive that kind of hardened itself over upon being deathed. What it's capable of doing is going to be explained in the Behemoth arc. There's actually quite a few powers, aside from obviously slinging around and doing all this stuff. It's got some quite magical things involved with it too, and Behemoth arc is going to have a great journey with that. DW Originals 01 says, who is Dova Moira? In Transmission 10, Dovacom tells Abram that his safe state. But who are they exactly? Were they programmed by Gabriel Valentine when he was originally programming Dovacom, or did he come out by some other means? So I'm going to try and decipher that question because I'm kind of slow. So Dova Moira is, have you ever seen a regular operating system and you've seen the boot safe mode where like at the beginning, it's like a BIOS. If you look into a BIOS, it's like the deep end of the hardware and you've got like a really clunky software. It's where all the deep baked stuff is in the background compared to what you see as a beautiful operating system on either Windows, Mac, or Linux, whichever one. There's usually a kernel or a BIOS or something like that. Dova Moira is basically that locked away safe. This would have been created in Gabriel Valentine's leadership in the Domeplex. The Domeplex has a select amount of laboratories and facilities and security infrastructures. It was meant for a completely different purpose while Gabriel was born, and now you see Abram has used that all as a weapon rather than a thing to benefit the land. And there were a lot of locked away mysteries that I think he was hoping to share with his family until the whole incident happened, where he got too close to the sun, he started experimenting with crazy things, and suddenly he's genetically being modified and mutated to become a monster of his own shell. Abram sees that and thinks completely different of it and decides, well, my dad's a prick, so I'm going to create this, take all the stuff that he's made and change everything. He wasn't trying to make tyranny. His mind was that Abram was like, oh, well, I don't like anything that he did, so I'll just do anything that's different from it and it's a success, even if that ignorantly means the fate of the world is worse at hand. But Dova Moira is the safe state BIOS behind Dovacom. Dovacom is what you see in the front end with everything that is kind of a lock in itself, but go further in you Dova Moira and you get to see all these memories. This is how Abram gets a bit of insight as to what Gabriel was like on the nicer side of life when they finally connect. Hi, I'm Awkward asks, anything you think is pretty cool that happens after Goliath's throne, like a jotted down idea or something like that? Oh boy, I can't talk about that. Maybe you will see soon though. I wish I could tell you now, because yeah, there are a lot of ideas, can't explain what they are. There are some that we actually had to omit because it wouldn't make sense, and there's stuff that we've kept. We've kept mainly all of the bullet points that I had in mind. All the story still plays out, it's just how and, all the little nitty-gritties that we've got. But yeah, no, I wish I could say it. May be able to find out real soon though. Abo Hashish 88 says, does Goliath's futuristic glasses have abilities, or is it just for character design? Yes, the visor does have abilities. When it was built in the Domeplex as a prototype, this would be its language translator. It would be generally, how an Apple Watch has like different signatures of like measurements, so heart rate, blood rate, all that sort of stuff. It would monitor that too, so it would act as a translator, it would act as a body analyzer, it would be the window, sort of like, have you seen those new Meta glasses that come out, like, you can see, like, comes up with information on the fly and everything? That's sort of Abram's window to his own operating system being behind some stuff. You'll kind of know that Biobond or Jebediah speaks in sort of a binary Morse code kind of thing. Abram's able to the reason why Abram can then decipher what Biobond is saying, not only because there's like a receipt register that comes out, but also his visor is able to translate what that Morse is saying. Similarly, Goliath's visor is kind of a primitive prototype of that, but pretty much does kind of the same thing. Voxen says, was Goliath inspired by any particular characters or mythos? Eldritch, any plans to introduce more Eldritch-like stuff to the Iris world? Creatures at some point, like Motha Hive? Though there was a reply that says, I've been wondering if he was inspired at all by Goliath from the tale of David and Goliath. I actually have never read David and Goliath. I've never seen it. For me, the name Goliath just felt big. It just feels big, and as I wish there was a more intellectual way of saying it, but it just sounded big to me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, let's go with that, because he was a big fellow. As far as like character, I guess any generic Grim Reaper, but I just wanted him sci-fi. Like I wanted a skeleton. I remember being in that live stream just kind of like, I want a skeleton, and I just drew a skeleton. Oh, he has a cool scythe, and then he had a visor and everything, and I'm like, that's really all it was. As far as introducing more Eldritch-like stuff, Oh boy, we've got a lot of cool things on the horizon. Again, can't share much. There's probably going to be a little glimpse of that. I mean, there's so many different Vegalian subsystems in the world that have many different species, so you never know, we may see some more, but I personally don't think this is the last time you'll be seeing Motha Hive, or any iteration for that fact. We've been thinking, the Eldritch stuff is like, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I love Eldritch stuff. Dusk Plays Games asks, out of all the arcs for Irish, which one was your favorite to write and favorite character from that arc? Well, the one that's mostly fleshed out is the Valentine one. I had a lot of fun with all of them, but I think as far as indulgence goes, the Behemoth one right now, there's some stuff I've written for Baltorne that I think is really interesting, but it's all just like setting up the stage. Behemoth is the one I'm really excited about because that's the first one I wanted to get into. It's that really show the world of Goliath. Contrary to what people think, I don't necessarily like writing villains. I write them and I can write them very well, but I prefer writing protagonists. I prefer writing in the perspective of, you know, the perceived let's shine on and conquer and all of that. And that's where I want to be. And Goliath is obviously the one on the list. That and Motha Hive. It's hard to choose because like every single character I've made, I have a deep love for. I find it all very interesting stuff, but I don't have much more than that. Tyler the Superman, how do you come up with a Valentine Renegade transmissions? So I think this was slowly, as Dawn of the Demetrix was finishing, I had like a track list in mind. And this is where like I had a rough idea of how I wanted the story to start. I knew there was going to be like two worlds, one on the depths and one on the Doria. But how it played out, it was funny. Every single day I looked at the track name and what it meant and just kind of improvised. Every day was like a proper improvisation. Some days easier than others. Sometimes I needed bullet points to kind of explain what I wanted. But yeah, most of it was all improvised. I just like start acting it out and then like piecing it all together at the end and finding like, okay, well, I've made something. Now I'll worry about making it make sense in the future. Jacob Budgeon asks, how did you come up with the concept for Vegala Infinity and Hitherfall and Yondrathal? Caffeine and lack of sleep is a one way to go about it. We were doing Heart of an Artist Resurrection, and I was kind of stuck on what I wanted to do for it, and I'd already kind of created this kind of realmly universe. I needed to explain what happens where, like, is Goliath traveling to a whole new planet or what? And it didn't quite make sense for me to make a whole new planet. So I decided that both planets were part of, like, the sister realms. Just thinking of realms. And then in that realm, I had to think like, well, there's probably more than that one system there. Where's everything else? And it just came to a point where I'm like, I have this huge galaxy. I need something in the center because I like the idea that there is some sort of deity power figure that started everything, but there's a fusion of that and science to go with it. So it's kind of like a mixture of both. And I thought of like, I'm a sucker for mythology. So, you know, sister realms were definitely something that I really wanted to participate in. And I was playing a lot of like Norse mythological things. I was watching a lot of shows, playing a lot of games. And I've even got like a big old book. So like I thought of like Here and There. And I'm like, let's just make Here and There sound cool. Hitherfall, Yondrathal. And there we go. It's like so much more comical when you think about it that way. Vegala, and again, was one of those kind of words where I kind of blurted out whatever I thought sounded cool, and then I'd have a sense for it as it went down. This kind of, you know, this formula happens many days. I'd have one little blurt out that's 5 seconds, and then I'd spend the next 5 figuring out how the fuck it makes sense. And so Hitherfall and Yondrathal was created that way. Bondushki asks, how exactly do I go about learning the Iris Law? I love every song from both albums, but I have no idea where to start learning about it. So as I've said beforehand, it's best to just start with Story of Vegala. We have a playlist of like all the things, so we have a full Iris playlist that should be in its order, but Story of Vegala is the one that I'm starting at. It's the very beginning of absolutely everything. That's kind of been fleshed out and already been done. What I'm working on right now is the Behemoth arc, which is a series of like, there's 3 books, Behemoth, Valentine, and Baltorne. They all happen somewhat around the same time. That focuses on Dawn of the Demetrix, but there's loose bits of knowledge that I've been able to give about each of them, as well as the Goliath's Throne album. Like, how does that play out in it? For most people, Goliath's Throne is pretty much like, you know, end game of the whole story. This is the mainline one, because there's several stories in the Iris universe. Like, I'm sure with every subsystem there's something, but with this one specifically, it focuses on the main deal. And if you want to learn about the main deal, best place to start, for me personally, is the story of Vegala stuff. Again, if you try follow everybody else trying to talk about all these other things, then it can result in some confusing times. But if you're okay with also hearing that, I'm not trying to say you can never know. It's probably better to start with one place. Alternatively, we do have a website, daonline.co.uk/iris, and I'm going to be a bit more active in Will Ryan Originals, probably do more Q&As on this, just to kind of like, there will be more in the future. This is by Brandon BBB. In regards to the Iris, will Goliath learn the whole truth about what happened on Vegala Infinity? What would his reaction be if this was the case? Yes. I can't tell you what his reaction is. That would spoil things. But I think you can kind of go along the line of he is discovering the truth and he wants the truth. So take it as you may. But he will absolutely know about the truth of everything. Cat Sticky asks, what is the significance of the other planets and besides Vegala Zero Infinity? I know there are brief descriptions of their purpose, but do you plan on giving them more depth in the future? I have been working on a little bit of depth on each of these things. They all have... I have made creature designs out of all of these, and I've given them some semi-little stories along the way, but nothing quite concrete. As far as significance, I don't think they'll truly present massive significance until nearer towards the end of the mainline story, because it will focus on these things as they come about. You've got Havoc soldiers, so I'm pretty sure out of all these systems, you'll start seeing many incantations of them. They recently just did something for the Botchlift Nile. I mean, those are fucking crazy. Well, more so Botchlift Nile, Philippices, Trojan Magnus, and you know, all of those. That there are stories that we've made, but I want those systems to kind of present themselves as mini stories. They have a character, they have something there, they stand as their own thing, they're able to have something separating them all together. But the mainline story, you don't need any of those subsystems, and basically it will be explained towards the very end of the mainline what all of this means. And Story of Vegala does go into, as it says, it mentions about all of these other things briefly, but you'll learn about that closer to the end of the GT arc. And I think there might be something that we're showing very soon, so who knows. Magnus Opus 117 asks, how does Goliath get to Nidoria? I know the Martha Hive is involved with him at the time of Transmission 9. Did they merge, which would fulfill Tyrant's Fear? Okay, so Goliath manages to find his way into Nidoria. The means of that is nearer the very end of the Behemoth arc. There's, I don't know if that's necessarily Tyrant's Fear at that point. What's quite funny is, Tyrant got it wrong. I won't say how, but, you know, here we go. Ender Liliarts. Any more on the Valentines? There's not much I can report. Right now I'm working on the Behemoth arc and pretty much anything surrounding that. As far as Abram goes, I've already done him for the Valentine Renegade. You'll know a lot more about the Valentine Renegade's arc as it will be fully densified. There will be a lot of cool things going on with that later down the line, but the first project now is basically Behemoth. But I have been thinking about them lately, so we'll see. Real Glitcherade. Remembering back in 2022 with the Hardened Artist Physical Edition release trailer, is Abram on a redemption arc or is it just a temporary truce? I wish I could tell you. I could probably. I don't know if I'd call it a redemption arc, would it? I feel like it's a sense of purpose, like he's still selfish in this. There's a big old selfishness about him, so I think it's a bit of both, redemption and a temporary truce. It's like, well, this will be good for me, but I don't imagine that I'll be thinking of you, I'll be thinking of me in this. Because Dova Moira or Dovacom is the one that's being like, yeah, you kind of fucked up, buddy, you're gonna need the beast. And so Abram's like, all right, fine, you know. He's got his own plans, I guess. Adrian is Nowhere asks, is the story of Vegala a bunch of lies Tyrant is telling towards Goliath? The true story of Tyrant and Fate is the OG Heart of an Artist. So the album Heart of an Artist is incredibly interpretive. Like you can take it away from the whole Iris lore and just have your own meaning for your story, because that's the way the album was. So I don't like to think that Heart of an Artist on of itself is a true exemplimentary description of what it is, but you can make your own meaning out of it. As far as the lies, yes, Tyrant is basically gaslit Goliath. Not entirely. So the story's kind of beat for beat, but there's a few things and perspectives that have been missed from those Vigil Orbs, and Tyrant is obviously trying to keep Goliath there by showing all that struggle. Fun fact, the Vigil Orb may last 10 seconds or so in the depths, but Goliath will have felt like he has lived an entire lifetime inside those memories. So that's how he's able to go down. It's a very crazy thing. Dion the Third asks, what made you want to fit Abram into the story of Goliath's throne? I think I was bored. I think it was the pandemic, and we wanted to be creative, and I had, as I said before, the villain in mind. I was like, well, somebody's going to have to steal something, and how is that going to be a threat somewhere down the line? And I had it in my mind that Goliath is somewhat of a truth teller, somewhat of a, I fight for the truth, I fight for justice, I fight for all of this. And Abram's the kind of like, nah, fuck you, you know? So I think I wanted to fit something in there as a counteract. Like, stories have to have some tension. Stories have to have back and forward. You can't just have a perfect story, else you're just projecting, really. I don't know. I think you can have like an ending that's you, but I think it's really hard to make a good ending that suits everybody. So I think I've more so focused on the tension point, and I thought Abram would fit as a really good tension point. Now that everything just happened to come together, it's great. A3MKYN. I wish I could pronounce that, I'm sorry. If Gabriel Valentine or any character within the Iris lore were to exist in the real world, what kind of people would they be? And what would they do? If Gabriel Valentine, I think he would be pretty much doing the same thing as a good Samaritan. He'd just be a Samaritan for the people. I don't know if he'd be a mayor or he would be kind of a councilman. I doubt he'd be prime minister. In this day and age, I don't think it would work, specifically because like he's built some form of great utopia that I don't think this world would entirely agree with. And considering the circumstances of the Nidorians, who have been living a pretty peachy life for a long time before it gets fucked over, obviously, it's harder to persuade his ideals. Or he may just run a laboratory. I think he would either be a mayor or he'd run in a laboratory or something. He was a very smart individual and liked to be hands-on with that. I don't think he'd quite make being president or prime minister or whatever. I don't think he'd be able to do that, because there's a lot of hateful people in the world, and you know, it's whatever. Abram, gosh, well, I know he'd probably be like a prince or something. He'd be like the Silver Spoon Oxfam University student, gets pampered and everything, and then has to live the rough life and starts developing a Jokerog down the line. I imagine him not doing well. Goliath, I truly don't think would ever be able to exist in the real world. I don't think at all. And if he was in the skeleton format, he'd probably be one of those like skeletons in a scientist lab. Except he could probably move. I don't know. Interesting question though. Well, I don't know, how are you? I'm doing fine. Asks character design inquiry. I've heard that you dislike Abram as the idea of a person. Why voice and make him look comparable to yourself? Look comparable? I don't think he looks anything like me. As far as voice, I just have a budget. A lot of people, this is the interesting part about animation in the industry, you'll notice that there's several people who voice either the villain or the hero of any of the stories and everything. I feel it's a bit boisterous to be expecting to voice the hero. I often feel like to make it fair game and fair bias, it's easier to just play the villains of something and let somebody else be the leader. It shows that people can be able to do that. You see, Gravity Falls had Alex Hirsch voice pretty much a lot of the characters, maybe they're side characters or some main. And you see Phineas and Ferb, you know, they have them. It just seems easier to do it that way. I didn't have a budget back then either. A lot of it was focused on DA games, and it was really hard to find anybody in that field. But luckily nowadays we have cast direction, we have voice actors and stuff like that. You know, so now we've got all these really cool people in. I generally wanted to design Abram as somebody that I would dislike, but the philosophy of Iris was simple. You know, the idea of like, you know, it's always the nice looking things that seem to win, and it's always the ugly things that seem to lose. Flip it on its back. Make the ugly things the winners and the prettiest things, the handsome ones, the villains. Like, let the grim dark have a bit of an angel side to it, you know? That's the kind of thing I wanted to go for, and so Goliath being this monstrous Grim Reaper type thing, but being the hero is like a big part of it. I tried to pick something that was like very empathy, and very stylish, and very just random. And then the idea of a person, again, it all just came from like, well, he's a villain. What are we gonna do with him, you know? FreakyU0, is there something of your experiences in the lore of Iris? I don't think quite concretely, no. I don't think I've ever lived anything quite like what Iris does. I think I live life and then something bleeds through, but oftentimes I end up kind of... It's funny, I always sit in bed and I have an idea, and then I'll always sit for hours going, well, why is that wrong? Why is that? And finding all the wrong ways, getting myself upset, the wrong and right, and everything, just doing it back and forward, until eventually it's just kind of ingrained, and then whatever idea comes out afterwards just happens, and we make it extravagantly as crazy as possible in the lore, because would you ever see that stuff in the real world? It's meant to be bombastic, it's meant to be crazy, because none of that would exist in the real world. So I don't necessarily think I've experienced quite the level of what the other characters do. I've experienced betrayal, I've experienced lies, I've experienced like generally life crises, like climate crises and stuff, but I try not to project myself into these mediums because we have too much of that, I feel, in the real world. And I think people just want a story to kind of just follow along with. And I think deep root, the life will be there, but as far as anything else, I'd prefer this to just be as bombastic and crazy as it wants to be. Remember, I only wanted to make this as a really cool, like, battle sequence, and I wanted to make some, like, kind of cool explosions and all that. Didn't think I'd get this dense, so it's very, very crazy. I knew it'd be big, but not this. How did you come up with Goliath? Asks Epu2011. Love the recent stuff, keep it up. Thank you. So how I came up with Goliath? Skeleton. Skeleton sits down and drinks. Yeah, it was supposed to be originally Goliath was just this kind of like snarky grim reaper for the lies in the world of the internet. It's just everything was just I'm the cool guy. Cold Man kind of was a big exemplar of that. But then I think I sort of went down the album and I was like, this is starting to become a bit deeper as well. I sort of made him into an envisionment of, right, if he can go through the worst troubles, then I can go through mine. And that was about it. But thank you for that. J Toxic Waste asks, okay, here it goes. Can you elaborate a little more on how the Ether Bridge works, or it's something that'll be explained later? I'll answer that first because it's a three-parter. The Ether Bridge is connected to the onyx crystallite floor on the depths, which also connects itself to the great beyond. Ether as a material in itself is a transitional material. It's able to conduct energies and then transmit itself to something based on what it's focused on. So it's focused on fortitude on the ground of the colony, whereas also it's connected to the great beyond. So it's passing light through the planet. 2. So does Abram invade the depths when the wormhole is open and fuck the soldiers open, if it's still a canon event, or most of the damage was caused by the explosion? So Abram didn't go out and try and take the depths. He didn't even know it existed. All he knew is he wanted to make this big giant thing and hopefully convert it into a chemical called Dimitrum, which would help benefit the planet that he's on, which it doesn't. He's stupid. But he accidentally opens up a wormhole between realms, and that Dimitrex is now alive and well. It's trying to go back to its original creator, which is the ether and aftershock that the iris is. Forms a weird chemical compound. It kind of mesmerizes the fog and smog in the air, the sand particles, and they change and metamorphosize the Onyx Colony soldiers by proxy. So all of this is done by proxy. He's not gone to invade them, but yeah, that's a bit of clarity there. And 3, how the hell did the soldiers manage to bring Moth the Hive to the Encrypt? Well, upon Moth the Hive slicing into Father and Tyrant, remember, Moth the Hive kind of created a surrogate baby out of that. And Moth the Hive in itself is not necessarily one big giant being. It's a lot of different paradigm worms that are choreographed to create this mysterious looking winged beast. So when the Moth the Hive falls down, so do the paradigm worms. They get weaker, and it's more a case of just picking up each individual paradigm worm and securing it in a cage, and then traveling all the way back to the Purgaprime Castle somewhere near around there, or somewhere further out in the forest, where they would build the Encrypt, and that's where it would be stocked. And Goliath would never know about this, possibly until later. Vampire Bunny. Does Goliath still have a voice after becoming Skelly Boy? Yes and no. So he's not necessarily able to vocalize what he says, but he can project it into the minds of anybody else. He does have a bit of inhabitants with the iris, and he can also think to himself. So you'll hear him, hopefully, if we do like an audiobook of, you know, the Behemoth arc, you will hear him say stuff. And obviously later down the line, you'll be able to hear him say stuff as well. But it's all projections from the mind. We just get to hear that from the reader's and narrator's perspective. How do the citizens of Nidoria view Goliath and the Iris? Asks Walking Degenerate. The citizens don't necessarily have a single clue about who Goliath is or what's going going on. As at the point of Goliath entering Nidoria, all the people are still under the Dimitrim plague. So they kind of zombified, they have no idea what's going on. And I can't talk about anything else. It would be spoiler territory. I may be able to talk about that later. Not Seraphase asks, are there plans to have some illustrations of other characters like Lady Fate or Vyson in the near future? Yeah, I do plan to show them in the near future. I don't know how far, but you're definitely going to see at least one of those named in there eventually in one particular format. And obviously with the Chapter 1 of Behemoth, Vyson is an important role in Chapter 1. So yeah, you'll definitely see him. And Lady Fate, as they're all big kind of things, but one thing at a time. Lucas Buster 42. Since the old story of Goliath and Harvard Artist stuff has most likely been retconned at this point, what were some of your biggest roadblocks when it came to readapting, recontextualizing the old Harvard Artist and GT Law into the new story that we know today? There weren't really that many roadblocks at all. This was the most natural and organic piece I'd written, and none of it was really too difficult. It just kind of regurgitated, and it still managed to keep the same beats and nodes. The biggest thing was keeping what was the essence of the old meaning of it as intact as possible while creating a brand new definition. It's not so much about trying to retcon and change a lot. In fact, I don't think I've retconned a single thing. The meanings and the theories have just been expanded further on. So as far as recontextualizing goes, I didn't really have too much difficulty thinking about the story of Egala, because this is the thing, I don't like rushing projects. And the reason why I don't like rushing is because when you do, you tend to find a lot of plot holes and things just don't tend to do well. So letting life live, you just end up having this brain blast idea and you're like, whoa, holy shit, no, actually works. And if you're consistent minded, then that stuff rolls off the tongue really quickly. Or the minds, depending on where your tongue is. I hope it's not in the brain. Whose perspective do the albums take? In Harvard Artists take Goliath's perspective and perspective of Father Tyrant, or just Father Tyrant's perspective alone? That's entirely up to you. Whether you want to think it's, you as Goliath seeing through the Vigil Orbs, or following Father Tyrant and stuff, because essentially you would be Goliath as Tyrant or Tyrant. You can basically be whoever you want to be in that one. So Dawn of the Dimitrescu has 3 different arcs, and it's more of a third-person perspective, so it's talking about everything. Same with the GT, it's a very third-person perspective where, we're watching as something happens. There's no real true perspective, although there are main characters for the 3 arcs in Dawn of the Dimitrescu. The main one in the Behemoth being Goliath, main one in the Valentine is Abram, and the main character in Baltorne is Redacted. Oh, you thought it was you? I have been writing. Can't say anymore though. It is just me. Asks how do you conceptualize the appearance of these characters? Are they inspired by anything, or is this just your creative wrinkled brain conceiving these ideas? Yeah, it's just a lot of brain blast from the wrinkles. There's like ripples that come out. I'm sure it comes from a lot of influence from media. Like I consume a lot of media. Like I'm never on one thing. I never fixate over one thing. Okay, that's a lie. Warhammer as of recent has been one, but even then I haven't had the time to paint or do anything. Mostly recently I've been into Gravity Falls. I've only known this thing for about a week. So I have no idea how to even think that might be an inspiration, but it might. So I never really go, oh, I want it to be like this and this and this kind of thing. I know it's a lot easier to compare because then that would be helpful for concept artists and things like that. And I would if I knew what I was referencing. I have no idea. So yeah, it's just a lot of wrinkles and a lot of life. DNC343 asks, what were your main inspirations behind the Biotide, if any? I had a nightmare, and a lot of it was running away from thousands of those types of things. And it was really eerie. It was like a grayscale dream where it was completely black and white comic book looky, but the only thing that was red and sort of pinky was the Biotide. And I was running away and hiding, and it would come out and snap my neck. And I woke up, and I was just normally if I don't at least tell it or I write it down, it'll be on my mind and it will be a thing that I'll end up struggling with. So I think I put it down, and whilst I was making the Iris Law, I'm like, wait, let's do something with this. And then by proxy, it would then get rid of the nightmare that I had, and I won't be thinking of the same. Will we ever get to see Lady Fate in full design, and what is her relationship with Goliath? Asks Snoopy the Ninja. Lady Fate's full design, yes, you will absolutely see them at some point. I imagine not even too far off, maybe next year. And the relationship with Goliath is simple. That's the mother. Like, Goliath was a born surrogacy out of the combination of Motha Hive's dark matter and Father Tyrant and Lady Fate's drawn blood during Jaws of Dawn. Good question, though. Redcore Films, will we get more lore side stories from other characters in the universe? Jebediah, characters we haven't even met yet? Yeah, I imagine we will. There's a lot going on with the main... I want to try and focus on the main story. That's what everybody wants to see, so I don't imagine it will be for a long time. But if we can get funding, if we can get, like, content curation, if we get all of that, we may start inviting other authors into the picture to kind of like get more things out. You never know. I would like to focus on some of the side characters in many of these things, especially Baltorni. There's quite a lot. The Holy Bread Cat asks, what exactly is Vipe Corp and its relation to the Valentine legacy? I can talk about the Vipe Corp. Valentine was essentially the big legacy foundation of society that stood for unity and working together and everything, and Vipe Corp would happen to lend its technologies and machines over. It would be a technology company. It would be here we go, Iris technology. Yeah, it's all coming together, isn't it? But there would be the guys that would have created things like Vipe droids and, you know, the Smithsonian armor and what you saw in the GT Rethroned video, the Vipe Titan. So there's a lot. How big is the Encrypt? Well, how big is the Motha Hive? We shall see. That's the Real Duck Fan 1999. Thanks for that. Why did Goliath have to be the one to fight Abram? Why didn't Father Tyrant and Lady Fate do it? Asks Johnston 65219. It's simple. They didn't have the iris. Goliath did. Also, he kind of, you know, would you blame him? He's gone through everything. And he started remembering everything, and now he's pissed. So, you know, we'll see. Is the story going to be an audiobook or a novel? Physical or digital? Asking a case of how to get a hold of it when it's released. Asked by Mido Samnox 1. Both, mainly focusing on a physical, but there will be an audiobook version of it down the line, whether it be on YouTube as well as Amazon or, like, you know, the Kindle store or anything like that. I'm looking at all the avenues. I've got publishers on mind. I've got all of the things that I want to do, but mostly we're probably going to try, like, independently publishing through the DA Online store and having some form of book to show for it and an audiobook online. We want to make it as accessible as possible, and we know not a lot of people can get the same access of physicals depending on global shipping, etc., like that. So we want to find a way to kind of make it digital too. So everybody will get it. That random virus, that will the Dimitrescu, like the Iris, get destroyed? Not sure how to answer the Dimitrescu one, but the Iris never gets destroyed. The Iris inhabits Goliath, so that's... If that was ever a theory, no, the Iris never got destroyed. Goliath inhabited it. Mendicate Inst. I'm guessing Inst is an Instagram. What was the inspiration for Abram and Dovacom and their relationship? That was it started off as like just putting two different things together, a semi-Jarvis / HAL 3000 and some piss baby. Just put them in the room and just see what happens. Can we make something out of it? Or was it going to be a trial and tribulation and improv through it? And we ended up coming up with it just slowly. Well, I came up with it slowly down the line. It just became focusing on every chapter and beat. And I sort of wavered the lines of like, what would happen during this? What would happen with all of that? And I think just putting them two together, the inspiration was just that we needed an enemy with high tech. The relationship came later. A lot of this is, you know, the events happen, the worldly events end up happening. The characters react to those. And that's their character growth as I go from there. Just Wenstra, what are the claws we see near the biobond mechanism for? I believe that the Biotides and the Vipe Titan also have those, but I can't figure out what their function in the biobond is. So... okay, this is where I actually reveal some cool stuff about Biobond, if it's not already been mentioned before. If it hasn't and you are first finding this out, welcome, here we go. I want you to look at the Goliath Throne Rethroned video. You'll see the Vipe Titan being infiltrated by Goliath at some point. I want you to look at who was inside that little hole, that big giant thing. That was Jebediah. Jebediah was inside that thing all along, buried beneath the domeplex. And those claws that you saw, they were just buried away underneath. They were kind of like stowed inside the same interfaces where Goliath was, the same bunker room, the same all of that. So whatever you saw of those, that's the Vipe Titan. Now you get to look at the Biobond single cover very differently and think, oh shit, that's actually a bit of a glimpse at the Vipe Titan's smaller claw system. So there's that. And of course their function, snippy snip. What else do claws do? How old is Goliath? How long have I lived? That will be answered eventually. I don't know if it will. I can't answer that. That was by Blakey Dabbs. Thank you. Oblivion Productions asks, what exactly is taking place plot-wise during the song Into the Beyond? This is where Goliath is noticing that the Great Beyond is in fact dead. This is the part where he leaps towards the Great Beyond and tries to reactivate it. I can't go into too much detail on how it goes about, but that's sort of where In Beyond is. That's whereabouts in the Behemoth arc he would be. Is the story of the Goliath lore still canon, VCR official? I'm pretty sure it is. Aside from the fact that we'll be having something brand new soon, maybe I can do a follow-up Q&A after this. If we've revealed something, I might be able to reveal more. So if you ask that again, that might be cool. Adam B. Nations asks, I've always wondered what the Iris and Demetrix were. As in, are they physical objects? Are they living beings? Apologies if this has been explained somewhere, but I've always been curious. Okay, they're not really beings. The Iris, if I can best describe it, is the archival of everything. The archival of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Everything that has happened is a truth. Every lie that has been told is by technicality a truth for it existing. The truth was the lie happened. Everything has been locked inside this archival emblem, which was made after the aftershock of life was created, and the deities had this on their hands. The deities of the whole system decided, right, we're going to make all of these to splash out the void and hopefully stop the bubble of the galaxy from sinking in and the damned coming through and going blah. The Demetrix was a fabricated and sort of copied, stolen artifact. It was from the giant ether boulder that comes through from the other realm onto the other side. Abram takes it for himself at the cost of his brother, rest in peace. And he goes to the Domeplex and tries to carve this out into what he feels is like this power that he saw from beyond. He knows and kind of remembers this emblem, and it's basically another big piece. But this thing doesn't retain memories. This thing will never quite do what the Iris does, as the Iris is the real thing. This is just an artifact. But what it does release is chemicals. It manages to do something with the Domeplex that inhabits this big giant chemical that goes out, and that's what causes the plague. Abram thinks he's saving the planet, but obviously he's not. So that's the way I would see it. Good question. Ms. Pinball asks, will you make a guide to the Iris lore? Probably. I know that I'm doing a follow-up video at some point which will explain in sort of TLDR terms what the lore might be. Maybe down the line, yeah. I know that right now we have the daonline.co.uk/Iris store. If you want to look at stuff there, there's always that. IDKO says, I'm honestly intrigued about what happened after the Vegala transmission. That one of Abram and Dova Moira. So am I, friend. So am I. I can't tell you, basically. That's hitting on spoiler territory, but some cool stuff happens. Joe Hodgson, what was the Goliath thinking when he did a little trolling stealing Abram's Dova visor? Another misconception. Yeah, I've answered this before. He doesn't steal the Dova visor. It just so happens to come through the wormhole, and he picks that up. So, besides, he's kind of dead and wakes up with no memory, so I don't think he really knows how to troll, really. A Goliath and Abram related, Stuff Animated asks, no, absolutely bloody not. No. They are completely separate from each other. Pixel Spider YouTube, at what point did you decide for the Iris story to explode into a giant universe? I think during the pandemic. I've said this a lot, but 2020 was a time where I really wanted to explore my creative juices, and Iris just happened to have several different stories in one, and I was hoping to maybe expand on that a lot more. So I think it really started at the beginning of the pandemic, when things started feeling good. Raphael Goman, when Dova Moira tells Abram to team up with the Beast, does he mean Goliath? I'll answer this first. Did he lose the battle against Abram and he's now retained somehow? I cannot explain that to you. Everybody's had this theory for a while, whether Goliath wins or Abram wins. And I'm sorry, I can't actually say anything. B-Box Chavez, not sure if this would be considered lore, but I love behind the scenes. So with that, what is the origin of some characters' names? Let's see. Again, Goliath I just thought was pretty big. Tyrant I thought was also very, strong. Fate I felt was more foreboding and mysterious. Abram just felt like it was very, you're looking at a lieutenant, you're looking at some kind of princely royal kind of name. You didn't want something like Chuck or whatever. Valentine was, the prosperity of the Valentine was based off of love. So, just a play off of the Valentine. I could probably go into more extensive detail if I had if I was in a stream or was in some form of podcast or whatever, I'd probably talk more about that. Whisper1809, we know you put a lot into these stories. I remember you going over Abram and what he represents, but what's the significance behind Dovacom and Dova Moira? Do they have deeper meaning that ties to your own experiences? Not necessarily. I think the only thing I experienced with Dovacom was, again, I was kind of making my own Windows operating system for the technology company I had called Iris a long while ago. And I just sort of took the name, and I sort of wanted to just give Abram I wanted to give him like a sad point. Something where you can kind of give him the empathy point, even though you wouldn't ever empathize with that kind of guy. There's one sort of thing that you can do is with Dova Moira and Dovacom overall, was Abram's only friend. Gabriel built Dovacom to sort of be this system that works, but also developed something called Dovacare, which was a small little Dovacom-based thing where he gave it to Abram when Abram had no friends. And so he would slowly develop a big friendship with Dovacom over time, and it just so happened to bleed into the world he's in now. Always been there, etc. And I think if I had to relate that to anything, I always had a friend in my time. I don't think I quite relate to Abram. I've always had friends. I've always had family and everything, so I don't quite know. I think I just wanted some struggle for him. There's times where I felt alone, I felt abandoned, I felt betrayed, I felt, every emotion you ever feel in real life encapsulates into one significant cool thing, but if you want to call it cool. Dovacom and Dova Moira, I think I just wanted to give Abram a friend at that point. This was where I started learning that villains were being empathized with by a large audience, and so I kind of wanted to put a little spell in there of like, yeah, let's just give them that. It'd be funny or something. Koilatika, what was the inspiration for Vitamos C and the Baltorne? Well, the Baltorne, they were essential to being like the second part of the planet, because that's where Jebediah would be. I wanted like some form of thing where the brothers would not be well with each other, and I think that involved one brother having to run away and one staying. So I needed two separate parts of the planet, and I'm like, right, well, one of them is the Domeplex, one of them is the Baltorne. And as far as Vitamos Z, I mean, obviously I think of the sun. I think vitamin D. You get your vitamin D from the auras of the sun, so I wanted something to kind of represent that, but wasn't too like weird of a word to come up with at that point. So something similar, Vitamos Z, ended up becoming the thing that Nidorians tend to kind of take in throughout the planet and gives all their nutrients and everything. I wish I could talk about their anatomy more, but I can't right now. Where and when does Abram come into play with the Harvard Artist story? He doesn't. Abram's not in Harvard Artist. He comes in during the dawn of the Demetrix arc. If you have to put it simply, Harvard Artist is basically sort of story of Egala territory, bleeding into sort of supplements of the Behemoth arc. Then you've got Dawn of the Demetrix, which has the Behemoth, Valentine Renegade, and Baltorne, which is all those three. And then the last, which is GT. Miss Spark 17339, why is the Goliath so powerful? Because why not? You ever seen fucking like big titan-ass looking like big muscular dude who kind of fights for everything? Is that not just badass? But he's not one who's fully powerful. There are weaknesses to this man. Like, you don't want to have him truly all powerful, so give him a bit of weakness too. But he was built as a war machine. Like, he's part of the dark matter of the void, of the damned, and he's also a combination of two of the strongest people in the Vegalian subsystem, Tyrant and Fate. Created the greatest strengths and defenses, and he would then sort of be conditioned and grown up to be a weapon. So for all that training and all of that, trial and tribulation would be the source of where it'd become with it. And also, he's inheriting the Iris, so that's the archival knowledge of everything. So he'll know some wicked powerful moves. He'll be able to do some crazy things that people would never think of. But he has his weaknesses too. There are vantage points, so you just have to be smarter than him, or to some degree be able to just find the right time, and boom, you've got him. Archer XYZ, what was the main inspiration behind the monsters created for Jaws of Dawn? This was a pandemic thing for sure. I know a lot of my friends were looking into Lord of the Rings, a lot of people were looking into Souls games, Eldritch, Tolkien, abominations, just kind of things that they always fascinated me to some degree. I like looking at like these deep mythological monsters. I also have a massive fear of like Leviathan-esque creatures in the ocean. So, big giant whales or like really weird looking fish. I actually have a deep sea fear, so I'm not really sure that might have bled through. But I remember wanting to take like simple concepts and flipping them over. So I thought, well, let's say moth hive. A moth generally just gets attracted to light, Well, the essence of the paradigm worms and all of that, and the Motha Hive as it builds up, it's not necessarily like just lured to it, it also just absorbs it. It absorbs the life, and it's a creature of the damned void bubble. It's a kind of like the rip in between the normal galaxy and the damned where the bubble lies. It's kind of a crazy ordeal. Jazzy Elves asks, well, I have a question that I've always asked myself. When Goliath arrives in Nidoria, do they have a talk with Abram or do they go straight to battle? I don't know. I would think that there may be a bit of exposition beforehand. I don't know how much of a talk they'd have, though. Depends if it's short-winded or there was a long explanation or maybe there was some ration that tried to come of things. I mean, they definitely fight. They definitely fight at some point. There's a lot that happens in GT, so it's not just him and Abram fighting. There's actually a lot of other things happening at the same time. But yeah, I can't tell you if there's a lot to be said beforehand. I know Goliath's just focused on wanting to take the Demetrix. I imagine, like, what would be said is something like, Abram's like, well, look who's decided to join us. And Goliath's just like, I don't know who the fuck you are. I just move out of the way. I need the, I need the Demetrix. You have to pry it from my cold dead hands. And then, yeah, I think it would just start playing out like that. Because again, Iris, as far as Goliath's concerned, he has no clue who Abram is. He just remembers that something came through as the Demetrix and all that. He had no idea. And finally, Necromaz912 asks, what stories of Iris go in order? So it starts with Story of Vegala, and then the happening of the same thing is happening at the same time. Behemoth, Valentine, and Baltorne. And then the final one, which is GT. And that is the end of the questions. This was a way longer recording than I thought it would be. That was a lot of questions. Maybe I might have to cut some down. But I hope that was insightful and everything. Remember, Iris Direct is happening October 30th. We're going to show a lot of cool things. Perhaps maybe even some things in here, if not just a few, might be answered during that time too. I haven't really exercised any kind of outro for Will Ryan Originals. I've only ever done it for DA. God, I can't think of anything, can I? Shit. If all this stuff piques your interest, make sure to subscribe and see what we've got. Do it, I fucking dare you. Whether you're interested in Tolkien in space, whether you're interested in the capital of the gladiator killing game fashion, if you're interested in small anthology or big or small, we've got something for you. Subscribe to Will Ryan Originals and indulge in what we have today. Also, check out Will DA Games Ryan on Instagram and all that fancy stuff for the next news. The next news. Go to daonline.co.uk for more information. Sign up to our newsletter where we can show more stuff. I'm Will, and we just did the Iris lore. Ashabui!